Hey YouTube, Kevin Cleary with a knife video. Today I've got a blade that is kind of unique to my collection because this is the only Protech that I've had. It's the only Protech I've had any experience with, and likely the only one I will have because I live here in Canada where auto knives are illegal, and of course Protech's lineup is primarily auto knives. They do have a couple of manuals, including this one and the TR3. TR is Tactical Response 4 for this one, and TR3 for the smaller version, which is also a tie frame lock. So you're into tie frame locks, but you'd like a Protech, that may be a good option for you. It's also a little smaller than this. Now for me, this is a great option. You know, I like larger knives. I especially like the blade shape on this. I like the handle shape. I like the button lock. So there are lots of good reasons for me to pick this one up and add it to the collection. I've been really impressed with this. What I found about this knife is it's very versatile. So if you're watching this saying, you know, should I pick one up, should I not? I've got to say I've been very impressed. Everything that I've tried to do with this knife, every grip that I've tested, every, you know, piece of cardboard that I've cut, every fruit and vegetable that I've cut up, everything has just been easy. Okay, it just does all the things. There's been no times where I was using this knife thinking, I wish I had this, that, or the other, or I'm going to put this down and go get something else that I think would perform. It just hasn't happened with this knife. In that way, it's a lot like, you know, my Para 2 or, you know, lots of different full flat ground Spydercos, where it's just a really versatile, very useful all-around knife. Now, of course, it's primarily designed for combat, but this is the beauty of this knife is that sure, if you're a cop or a soldier or something like that, and you're thinking I may need my knife for personal defense, hey, this is definitely up to the task. However, you can this way carry just one knife and know that I can also cut my fruit, you know, at lunchtime. I can prepare meat, I can skin an animal, I can do all kinds of different things just because it's a very versatile knife. And I really appreciate that about a blade. I really like versatility in the knives that I use and the knives that I carry. All right, so let's go into some of the specifics, and I can tell you about just what it is that makes this knife appealing to me. Size and weight is where we always start, and size and weight is great on this. It's 9 1/4 inches overall. Very quickly, that makes it just a bit bigger than the 0560, which is a pretty, you know, I'm going to show you some common knives here. A little bigger than the 560. It's about the exact same size as the Recon 1, which I think is a pretty good competitive option, by the way. This is a knife that if you're really interested in this knife, but maybe the price or something doesn't appeal to you, I think this is a great competitive option that would come in at a significantly lower price point, even with the new CTS XHP steel. Another knife that I wouldn't call, this I would not say is sort of as hard use, as durable as this knife, but this is the, of course, Endura. But because a lot of people are familiar with the Endura, I'll just use it as a quick size comparison. So you understand this is a large knife, or on the large end of the spectrum, okay? in a knife industry that includes like the cold steel Voyager series, it's hard to call this a large knife, but it's certainly on the larger end of the EDC spectrum, no question there. Now, 4-inch blade, 5 1/4 inch handle, so that means it's, you know, 5 1/4 inches closed, and it weighs in at 5.5 ounces, which 5.5 ounces is great in terms of, you know, comfort in pocket. And, you know, I carry this knife all the time and you don't even notice it. It's not like you know, it's not like a 0300 where you're like, whoa, I've really got something in my pocket. This is not even noticeable as far as, you know, for me anyway. Now I know there's some of you who really are sticklers for a certain size or a certain weight, but I find this knife to be just a really good performer and find it totally comfortable and totally easy to carry. All right, now getting into the blade, let's zoom in for this portion of our discussion. Hopefully I can do that and have no issues with my remote, which I am going to have. Awesome. There we go. Okay, so here we are, you know, zoomed in nice and close to this so you can see what I'm talking about when I talk about the different features. This blade is a partial flat grind. You can see the flat portion here. It is all stone washed, really nice thin edged, so very good slicer, very cute point. Now remember, this knife is initially designed as a combat blade, so that slicing ability and penetrating ability, we can understand why that's built into this blade. What I would add though is that because of the good edge geometry, because of the nice angle of that secondary bevel, this is a great all-around cutter, okay? It really, really slices well. It really does all of those EDC tasks really well. And of course, because of this choil here, you know, you can choke up on this and do some very fine detailed work. So it's not like the size of the knife limits you in any way in terms of what you can do with it, which is a real win as far as I'm concerned. It is 154 cm blade steel, and 154 cm is a great steel. You know, it's not quite as difficult to deal with as S30V. It's a little softer than that. Comparable, you know, to VG10 or 14C28N. Great steel, you know, good corrosion resistance, good performance in terms of taking an edge and holding that edge really well. So no complaints at all about blade steel. This knife comes in a number of different, like there's a partially serrated and there's a DLC coated blade. I really like stonewashed blades just because they wear like iron. You know, you could probably cut with this for the next 5 years and you're never going to be like, oh man, this blade is all beat up. It's just going to, stonewash holds up really well to wear. So I'm a big fan of a stonewashed blade. Not too much else to say about the blade here other than, you know, there is this nice top swedge which achieves something that's really cool. This knife, this tip is still a pretty fine tip, okay? You know, you'd have to be a little bit aware of that when you're using the knife. Yeah, you could break it, but it does have more material, more steel out here than a lot of comparable knives. You know, if you compared this to a military or a paramilitary or, you know, lots of other blades that are designed to have a sharp tip, this blade carries quite a bit of material because of the way the grind takes this swedge out here. So the swedge means you sort of have a diamond shape as you move toward the tip. Gives you a little more material and a little more strength way out here. Now it's still quite fine, so I'm not going to recommend you go stab this into something and start prying on it. You will break that tip, but it's going to be a little stronger than some competitive options, okay? Which I think is kind of a win on the part of this knife. Let's move on to lockup and deployment. And the obvious thing that you have to say about this is that it is not an auto knife, okay? Protechs often are, this one isn't, but it's quite smooth. Now I have the pivot tightened down pretty well, and that is because the detent on this is not strong, okay? You can only feel just a little bit of detent there. And so to keep this knife from coming out of the handle when I don't want it to, I've tightened this pivot down a little bit. If you live in an area where, you know, gravity knives are no big deal, you probably don't need to worry about that. You can, of course, when I first got this, it had a little bit of blade play, and now it's solid as a rock. There's no blade play in any direction. But if you were to loosen this off a lot, especially if you had the auto version and you really wanted it to come out fast, you may get some side-to-side play. Often that is necessary to get the auto knives to fire as hard and as fast as you want them to. Not that they won't fire if you tighten it up more, but they may not fire with just as much explosive power as you'd like to see, okay? This one I found very good. Deployment is pretty smooth, pretty consistent. One interesting thing is that this rides on sort of a different kind of washer system than what you're used to. And so they've done a pretty good job of getting it to function well even without the bushings and stuff that we're used to seeing, okay? Now, so deployment is very smooth, but I want to talk about this button lock because this button lock is very, very good. I've had a number of button locks and I don't normally end up keeping them because they almost always have up and down play. Now, this is, you know, I'm not going to say button locks are a bad locking mechanism. They're certainly strong enough, they're certainly reliable enough, but here's the issue. When you make a button lock, the tolerances have got to be spot on. The slightest little issue is going to cause up and down play. Okay, so, you know, for example, a lot of the Brian Ty collaborations from CRKT have button locks. And that's great. I know Brian Ty is a big fan of the button lock, but he's a custom maker. That means when he makes a button lock, it is going to be, you know, just exact. And that means no blade play. In cheaper blades, a button lock can be an issue because of the fact that there's not the money there to make sure that, you know, you've got someone testing every single one. There's not the money there to make sure that your tolerances are as close as they need to be to get a solid lockup. Okay, now this has a perfectly solid lockup and it's just phenomenal. But what I'm saying all that other stuff so that you understand, you know, at a $200 price point, you're going to get a button lock that's awesome. So don't watch this and then go out and buy, you know, a $40 knife with a button lock and wonder, hey, Kevin said button locks are great, but this thing has blade play. Well, button locks are great, but they require a high degree of precision, okay? So it may be that if you buy one in a lower priced knife, you're not going to get that perfect level of precision required to get a super strong. And there is literally no play. This is solid as a rock, as solid as any other knife that I have ever held, okay? So lockup and deployment is good, and this is a button lock that is very, very well carried off, okay? It's really, really good. Now, as I said, you may not get that with every blade. I can open this quickly and close it quickly. It does require just a little bit of wrist action, but that's primarily because I've got this tightened down a little bit to make up for what I would consider a bit of a weak detent, all right? So, lockup and deployment is very good, very reliable. This one portion of this discussion is going to be one part that doesn't really apply if you're thinking of getting the auto, okay? Now, let's move on to the handle. The handle is 6061 aircraft grade aluminum, very comfortable, okay? I don't know, it was weird because Nut & Fancy in his video about this knife complained about the strength of, you know, the grip on this knife, how it's fairly smooth. There is some jimping on it. It's not exactly where I want it. I would like to see some jimping up here on the blade. However, having said that, there are these multiple finger choils that really lock you in, okay? When I'm holding this knife, I feel very confident that this thing is not going anywhere. And so I'm, you know, kind of perplexed at his comment about not feeling like it had a good traction plan. I feel like it's got plenty of traction. Now, in addition to being very comfortable for any kind of hard use task, you know, for combat use or maybe you're going to do some light bushcrafting or something like that, great. The other win about this knife ergonomically is that if you choke up on it and put your finger, I'm holding it upside down so you can see my finger side of this. If you choke up on it and hold it this way, it's really good for all those really fine detail tasks. So what's really cool about this knife is you get this big capable folder, but you don't lose any of the functionality of, you know, your smaller, lighter EDC because you can choke right up on this and really do some fine detailed work and get a lot of control in this blade. So that's what I meant when I was talking about the versatility of it. It's just a really, really great all-around knife for anything that you could come across. There is a lanyard hole back here as well as a glass breaker. And the one thing that should be said, the pocket clip is very functional. I have no, you know, I have no complaints at all about this pocket clip. But if you're a lefty, notice that there's no way of moving this to the other side of the knife. It is right hand tip up carry only. All right. So overall, I find this to be a really, really good knife. It's one that I've really enjoyed carrying. I love using it. I put it in my pocket a lot. Now I will say it's a larger knife, so this is a knife that if I've got this in my pocket, I may also carry something smaller. You know, I may carry my emissary, or I may carry my native 5 or something like that, just because this is a big knife, and with that nicely stone-washed blade, if you open this in public, it's going to stand out. People are going to notice it. That would be about the only drawback I would give this. I don't know if you work in an office and you're around a lot of people, yeah, you may want to have at least an alternate, okay, in case you feel like, maybe I don't want to get this out in this setting. All right. Not that it's the end of the world if you do. You know, I've pulled a knife out and cut things in all kinds of different settings, and only rarely have I gotten any kind of looks or questions about the knife I'm carrying. Now, part of that is probably because people know I have a collection and that I'm into knives, but I'm just pointing out that you may want to think, if you're going to buy this, you just need to know it's a pretty big knife and it's a pretty big blade, okay? That said, I think for a big knife, it's extremely versatile. You don't have any limitations, I don't think, in terms of what you can do with it, okay? So overall, great knife. I'm a really big fan of this blade. It's a little pricey, okay, but Protechs usually are. So if you're a fan of Protechs, if you have others, you're used to paying that premium price for what actually is a very well put together blade. But there are some competitive options out there that you may want to consider. That are, you know, around that $200 price point, and definitely a lot even well under that $200 price point. All right, so great blade. I'm really glad I've got it in the collection. I really enjoy using it. And of course, really enjoy carrying it. And I think you would too. There's no real, I'll be honest, I can't find any major detraction that I can say I just don't like this knife for this, that, or the other reason. Overall, I just think it's a great blade. The only things that might put you off are its size, and the fact that it's kind of right-hand tip up only carry. So if you're, you know, if you only ever carry right side tip down, or if you're a lefty or something, that might put you off. All right, but great blade, a little on the pricey side of things, but you know, for a Protech, that's kind of par for the course. We'll talk to you later.